Let's tackle the first piece of this, that Jesus was indeed a man. Jesus was human in every way. Kellen touched on this. This is the first half of the, not even the first half, this is the first portion of the incarnation, right? He knows what it means to live like us in every single way. Hebrews 2:14 through 18 puts it this way. Since the children have flesh and blood, he too shared in their humanity, so that by his death he might break the power of him who holds the power of death, that is the devil, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. For surely it is not angels he helps, but Abraham's descendants. For this reason he had to be made like them, fully human in every way, in order that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in service to God, that he might make atonement, there's our word, for the sins of the people. Because he himself suffered when he was tempted, he is able to help those who are being tempted. Jesus was 100% human. He ate, he slept, he hung out with friends, he got sad, he sweated. He probably had some pretty crazy BO sometimes. But he also knew what it meant to come face to face with our sinful desires and our temptations. He was tempted in every way. He, I'm sure, was tempted sexually. He fought off anxious thoughts, depression. In every single way. He knew what it was like to struggle. But here's the kicker. Hebrews 4:15 describes this, for we do not have a high priest, that is Jesus, who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way just as we are, yet he did not sin. Yet he did not sin. He lived a perfect, sinless life, something no other priests before him were able to do, right? Priests were held at this higher moral standard. Their standard to actually follow God's law was much more imperative for them. And they always failed. They still had to offer sacrifices for their own sins. Christ didn't have to do that. He was the perfect representative of the people to God because of this. Hebrews 7:23 through 28 continues in this description. Now, there have been many of these priests since death prevented them from continuing in office, right? But because Jesus lives forever, he has a permanent priesthood. Therefore, he is able to save completely those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede for them. Such a high priest truly meets our need. One who is holy, blameless, pure, set apart from sinners, exalted above the heavens. Unlike the other high priests, he does not need to offer sacrifices day after day. First for his own sins and then for the sins of the people. He sacrificed for their sins once for all when he offered himself. Take note of that. For the law appoints as high priests men in all their weaknesses. But the oath which came after the law appointed the Son, who's been made perfect forever. So as a priest, Christ lived that perfect, blameless life. No other priests were able to do, which made him the perfect representation of the people to God, right? Because he was 100% human in his incarnation. But also, as Kellen touched on last week, Christ is also 100% God in the incarnation. He's 100% fully God, so that means that he could live this sinless life. He was able to know all things in his omniscience, his omnipotence, his omnipresence. We talked about those terms a couple of weeks ago as well, right? And he was able to fully speak the truth in love with grace. He perfectly balanced that. He was, in essence, the perfect representation, not just of people to God, but also of God to the people. That's why he is set up to be such a perfect priest. But he's not just a priest, he's also a sheep. He's not just a man, he's also a lamb. Verse 27, chapter 7, again, says this: he sacrificed for their sins once and for all when he offered himself. When he offered himself. Perfect person, right? wasn't just that perfect representative, he was also the perfect sacrifice. He's the perfect sacrifices. Because he showed the fullest extent of his love and humility by sacrificing himself and shedding his own blood, which represents life for all of humanity to once and for all fully be able to experience the life that God created us to have all the way at the very beginning of creation by the shedding of his blood. God's own blood, you could say. Do you see the parallels with this? And how that represents our life. In other words, Christ's sacrifice was the atonement for the whole world's sin. His death was a substitution for what we deserved, and it satisfied God's wrath and anger towards sin because he was the perfect representative, because he was the perfect priest, the perfect sheep, the perfect sacrifice. And here's why. Hebrews 9, 11 through 15 describes it all this way. So much Hebrews today. But when Christ came as high priest of the good things that are now already here, he went through the greater and more perfect tabernacle that is not made with human hands. That is to say, it wasn't a part of his creation. He did not enter by means of the blood of goats and calves, but he entered the most holy place once for all by his own blood, thus obtaining eternal redemption. The blood of goats and bulls and the ashes of a heifer sprinkled on those who are ceremonially unclean sanctify them so that they are outwardly clean. How much more then will the blood of Christ, which represents life, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself unblemished to God, cleanse our consciences from acts that lead to death so that we may serve the living God. Verse 15, don't miss this. For the reason Christ is the mediator of a new covenant, that those who are called may receive the promised eternal inheritance, now that he has died as a ransom to set them free, the sins committed under the first covenant. Why does this matter? Why is it important for us to lift up the hood, to get behind the screen of the kind of work that Christ does? Understanding what all is happening here? It's because Christ's work sets us free.